It's okay. It's okay.
Mom, I had a dream that I was replaced by a diverse woman.
Oh, not again.
Yeah, only this time, it wasn't just me. They were taking all my favorite people and replacing them with diverse women complaining about the patriarchy. Will you check under the bed and make sure there's no Disney executives under there?
Rachel Zegler is back, and she's not taking the hits lightly. After South Park took a savage jab at Disney's woke Snow White, Zegler is striking back in a way that's making everyone talk. The once celebrated actress now finds herself at the center of a cultural battlefield. So, what exactly did she say? And more importantly, how does this change the conversation around Hollywood's most controversial remake? For those of you who haven't been following, here's the lowdown. South Park released an episode titled Into the Panderverse, where they roasted Disney's constant race and gender swapping, including Zegler's controversial role as Snow White.
I keep having the same dream. Everywhere I look, people are being replaced. The last time I had the dream, I was walking down the school hallway. And that's when I started to notice that something's wrong. Everyone I cared about has been systematically replaced. Why are they replacing every single character with someone who is diverse?
The episode didn't hold back, mocking the shift from classic fairy tale magic to a more woke agenda, with Zegler as the face of Disney's changes. Rachel, of course, didn't take kindly to being the butt of the joke. But before we dive into her reaction, let's set the stage. Zegler's take on Snow White wasn't your childhood fairy tale. Disney went all in on a feminist, politically charged remake, stripping away the classic romance and adding a modern spin that left fans outraged. Now, Rachel's response? That's where things get interesting. So, let's get into it. Rachel Zegler wasn't just some actress cast in a classic remake. She's been vocal from the start about how she wanted to change everything we know and love about Snow White.
I mean, the original cartoon came out in 1937, and very evidently so.
You said you were bringing a modern edge to it on stage. What do you mean by that?
I just mean that it's no longer 1937.
No prince, no love story, none of the traditional fairy tale charm that's been around since 1937. Instead, Zegler wanted to make Snow White a strong, independent woman who doesn't need a man to save her. Sounds fine, right? But here's the thing. Did anyone actually ask for that? Fans were furious when they found out. Snow White is supposed to be a classic love story, full of magic, romance, and that happily ever after ending we all know. But Zegler, she pretty much trashed the original.
Fans are growing more concerned about Disney's new Snow White remake, mostly because of what the lead actress has been saying to the press. Rachel Zegler has been described as a walking PR disaster for Disney's. We've heard her bag the classic story before.
In interviews, she went as far as to call the prince a stalker. Yep, the same prince who was part of one of the most beloved fairy tales of all time. She thought the story was outdated and needed a modern twist. But instead of creating a new character or story, Disney decided to rewrite one of the most iconic princesses in history. And that didn't sit well with a lot of people. South Park picked up on this and ran with it. In Into the Panderverse, they mocked Disney for constantly pushing diversity and woke agendas in their films. They swapped the races and genders of some of their most famous characters in the episode, poking fun at the absurdity of it all. And guess who was at the center of it? Rachel Zegler, of course. South Park ripped into the Snow White remake, saying that Disney wasn't interested in telling meaningful stories anymore. They were just checking diversity boxes and calling it a day, and they weren't wrong. Now, if you know South Park, you know they don't hold back. The episode was brutal, calling out Disney's pandering and how it's ruining the stories people actually care about. They highlighted what everyone's been thinking. Is this new Snow White even Snow White anymore? Or is it just another remake, twisted to fit Hollywood's woke agenda? Zegler's portrayal was the perfect target for the satire, and South Park didn't miss. But here's where it gets good. Rachel didn't stay quiet. She decided to hit back, defending her version of Snow White and, of course, her role in pushing Disney's empowered narrative. She doubled down on her comments, saying that the original Snow White is outdated, and that her version is what today's audience needs. She didn't care that South Park made her a joke. In her eyes, she was doing something revolutionary. But to a lot of fans, it looked more like she was tearing apart a beloved fairy tale just to score woke points. Rachel's response wasn't just about defending her version of the movie. It was about defending this whole new wave of remakes that seem more focused on pushing political messages than telling good stories. She's fully on board with Disney's new direction, even if it means alienating fans who love the originals. The question is, does she even care about those fans? From the way she talks in interviews, it seems like she's more interested in pleasing Hollywood than the people who actually go to see these movies. And that's the problem. People don't want to see their favorite movies get turned into political statements. They want the magic, the romance, the timeless themes that made these stories classics in the first place. But Disney and Zegler seem to have forgotten that. Quick break. If you're liking this breakdown and want to keep up with all the latest Hollywood news and drama, be sure to hit that subscribe button. Don't miss any future updates. Tap the notification bell to stay in the know when something major goes down. Now, back to the story. Let's talk about how people reacted. If you thought the backlash against Rachel Zegler was big before, it exploded after her response. Fans were already angry about the changes to Snow White, but when Rachel came out defending everything, it was like throwing gasoline on the fire. People who grew up loving the original Snow White couldn't believe what they were hearing. It wasn't just about changing the story. It felt like Rachel was attacking the very heart of a beloved fairy tale. The thing is, Snow White isn't just another movie. It's one of the most iconic Disney films of all time. For many people, it represents the start of Disney's magic. It's a story about love, kindness, and hope. But Rachel? She acted like she was doing everyone a favor by turning it into a political statement. And let's be real, most people don't want politics in their fairy tales. They want to escape into a world of magic and adventure, not get lectured about empowerment or gender roles. Rachel's comments just made things worse. In one interview, she said she only watched the original Snow White once and wasn't interested in it. That was a major red flag for fans. How can you be cast as one of the most famous princesses in history and not even care about the original movie? It came off like she didn't respect the story or the fans who loved it. Instead of embracing the magic of Snow White, Rachel seemed more interested in tearing it apart. And it's not just the fans who were upset. Critics started jumping in too. They pointed out that Disney's strategy of race swapping and changing beloved characters was starting to feel like cheap pandering. Instead of creating new, diverse stories that people could connect with, they were just slapping a new coat of paint on old classics. It felt lazy, and people were getting tired of it. South Park said what everyone was thinking. This new Snow White isn't about telling a good story, it's about ticking diversity boxes. But the worst part? Rachel didn't seem to care. She kept doubling down, acting like she was some kind of hero for modernizing Snow White. And while she might have thought she was doing something important, all she really did was alienate a huge part of the audience. People were already frustrated with Disney's constant reboots and remakes, and Rachel's attitude just added fuel to the fire. Fans didn't want a Snow White who didn't believe in love or magic. They wanted the story they grew up with. This whole mess made one thing clear. Disney's new direction isn't sitting well with a lot of people. And Rachel Zegler? She's become the face of that frustration. Instead of bringing fans together, she's driving them away. The more she talks, the worse it gets. It's not just about Snow White anymore. It's about the bigger picture of what Disney is doing to its classic stories. And if Rachel's version of Snow White is the future, a lot of people aren't on board. Just when you thought this whole Snow White fiasco couldn't get any messier, there's another twist. While fans were busy tearing apart Rachel Zegler and Disney for turning Snow White into something unrecognizable, rumors started swirling about Disney's reaction behind the scenes. Turns out they might not be as thrilled with Rachel as they first seemed. Yep, you heard that right. Despite backing her and the remake all the way, there are whispers that Disney is regretting the decision to give Rachel the lead role. And here's why. For a company like Disney, their bottom line is everything. They're used to being loved by everyone, not torn apart by fans and critics. But after Rachel's comments and the South Park episode mocking the remake, Disney's brand has taken a hit. Sources claim that executives are starting to panic about how badly this whole thing is going. Instead of Rachel being a symbol of empowerment, she's become the face of a movie disaster that nobody seems to want. And Disney? They're starting to feel the heat. Now, here's where it gets juicy. There's talk that Disney is scrambling behind closed doors, trying to figure out how to fix the mess they've created. Some insiders are even saying that they're considering toning down some of the changes in the final cut of the movie to try and win back the fans. Yep, after all that empowerment talk, they might be trying to sneak back in some of that old-school Snow White charm. Maybe even give the prince a bigger role than what Rachel hinted at in her interviews. Could this be Disney's way of admitting they've gone too far with the woke agenda? It sure looks that way. But here's the kicker. Rachel might not be too happy about it. After all, she's been all about pushing the new version of Snow White, making it clear that her character doesn't need a prince or a love story. If Disney decides to change direction and bring back some of those traditional elements, it could put Rachel in a very awkward spot. Imagine being the face of a movie that's been completely reworked because fans hated your version. Ouch. And it doesn't stop there. With all the backlash piling up, it's not just fans who are upset. Some of Rachel's fellow actors have been quietly distancing themselves from the controversy, not wanting to be caught up in the drama. Rumor has it that even some of the original cast members of other Disney films are starting to question whether this woke direction is really the way to go. Could we be seeing the beginning of a bigger pushback against these modernized remakes? Maybe Disney is starting to realize that their fans don't want everything they love turned into a political statement. So, where does that leave Rachel? Well, she's still defending her version of Snow White for now, but with Disney possibly pulling the rug out from under her, the future of this remake is more uncertain than ever. Will Rachel stand her ground, or will she be forced to change her tune if Disney tries to salvage what's left of the movie? One thing's for sure, this battle is far from over. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a like and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on more updates. And let us know in the comments, do you think Rachel Zegler's response will save Disney's Snow White remake, or has the damage already been done?